When the leaders of the human world finally gathered in Japan, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. But the biggest threat to their survival was not the invading army. It was Emperor Zangu deciding that the best way to secure his nation was to propose marriage to Velgrynd. Let's just say the true dragon was not amused and the entire world almost paid the price. AI Anime and Manga presents. If you're enjoying the story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps these videos reach more fans. And YouTube members get upcoming episodes early while helping cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and renders that keep this project moving. Now, let's head into the summit and see how humanity plans to fight back. The fate of the human race was riding on that day. Meeting Hall number 2 had been transformed overnight, and Velgrynd was satisfied with the results. A communicator had been set in place, along with ornate chairs, soft cushions, and a table against the wall prepared with light fare and drinks. The unnecessary fixtures had been cleared out of the large meeting room, and the refined decor had been chosen to match the tastes of the world leaders who were about to visit. Several servants waited nearby. Everything looked first class, good enough that no guest would question the conquering empire's ability to provide a proper reception. Velgrynd looked over the room and gave a small nod. I like this. Well done, Yamamoto. Kanji Yamamoto almost seemed ready to ascend on the spot. Yes, my lady, thank you very much. Simply hearing that from you makes me feel like I, Yamamoto, am rising toward the heavens. He was an erudite sycophant if ever one had existed. But today his groveling had practical value. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to earn Velgrynd's favor, and he had succeeded beautifully. Velgrynd had always been a connoisseur of fine things, so impressing her was no small achievement. The military officers who came by to inspect the room were amazed that Yamamoto had managed it in a single night, and even his staff held their heads high, proud that their boss had pulled it off. Right, Velgrynd said. We're short on time, so let's get started. She sat down with effortless elegance, and then, with no wasted motion, began working the communicator. The first nation she contacted was the United States of Azeria. Velgrynd opened the call warmly. Hi, George. Doing well? George Hayes appeared before them, along with the members of his cabinet. They were not merely on the other side of a screen. Velgrynd had used dimensional connection to bring them directly into the room, and the Azerian officials could scarcely believe what had happened to them. George, confused but not truly frightened, looked at Velgrynd and gave a shaky smile. Yeah? It really brings me back seeing you act all crazy like this again. But maybe it's weird to say this. I'm relieved you haven't changed at all. Velgrynd chuckled. Why would I ever change? I know it has been 25 years for you, but to me we only left each other a few days ago. George accepted that with a small nod. Ah, yes. Right you are. George's cabinet members remained stiff and bewildered, so Yamamoto smoothly prevented any interruptions. With one casual look, he sent the servants into motion. Drinks were offered, chairs were indicated, and in a few moments the stunned Azerian officials were able to relax enough to take in their surroundings. Meanwhile, Velgrynd and George's conversation was already gathering speed. Oh yes, how I remember, Velgrynd said. There was never a dull moment around Laurent. George answered, yeah. Dad told me how you always put up with his big talk. Velgrynd went on. I certainly did. Like the time he declared, the day before a major hurricane, that the next day would be clear and sunny. George said, I know that story. Trust me, he told it to me before bed more times than I can count. And it really was sunny, thanks to you. There was a baseball game that day, Velgrynd said, amused by the memory, and all the neighborhood children were looking forward to it. Laurent was always playing around with them, telling all sorts of lies like that. Perhaps that was why he said it to me. Something like, what would be the harm if something I said actually came true for once? And I agreed to it. It was the dumbest thing, I tell you. The idea that Velgrynd had single-handedly quelled a hurricane made everyone in the room pause. One Azerian official muttered, You're kidding me. Another whispered, She is not even trying to hide how abnormal she is. Velgrynd either did not notice their shock or did not care. She stayed with the memory. "Oh, was that why?" George said. "Dad only talked about how hilarious it was when the children got so freaked out. I did not know there was a reason behind it." Velgrynd answered warmly. But the children were happy too. Their team was excited to play that day. There was a very long home run, if I remember. "I'm sure there was." George's expression softened, then clouded. "My child loves baseball too, you know." Velgrynd noticed the change immediately. It was slight, the sort of shift most people would have missed, but she was reading the emotions framing George's thoughts. She understood that the baseball story had touched something painful. "Actually," Velgrynd asked gently, "how is Emile doing?" Emile Hayes, George's son, was the reason for his sudden melancholy. Velgrynd had brought up his name deliberately, hoping it would make it easier for George to speak. George let out a strained breath. "Ah, there you go again, Velgrynd. Nothing ever escapes your notice, does it?" Velgrynd softened. "That is not true. You are simply like a son to me. I worry about you." George laughed weakly. "Well, thanks. I really do not think this is the kind of thing the leader of a nation should talk to anyone about, but you are the only person I can count on. Can you lend me a hand, maybe?" Velgrynd replied. "Of course. You are Lauren Hayes' son, after all." George shed a tear. His voice dropped to a whisper. "My son needs help." Then he explained what had happened. Azeria's Department of Defense already knew that the nation's military had been taken over by the Mystics. That alone was terrible. But according to George, David Reagan, the fleet commander at the center of the crisis, had sent an emissary to Central Command with his demands. In essence, Reagan had ordered the government to hand itself over to the Yohma. The Yohma were not trying to wipe out mankind immediately. They wanted to rule this world and turn it into their own paradise. Destroying governments would only leave them with cleanup, so their demand was political control. "They are asking us to bow to their commands," George said. "If we do, they will not rob our top officials of their free will, and they will guarantee their personal safety." Velgrynd listened, then asked, "Why not accept?" George answered, "Because they are deploying into the Great South Sea to stage an attack on our capital. That, and they intend to tell our people the truth about this whole war. It would destroy whatever authority our government has left, and it would set off panic we could never control." Honestly, I am at the end of my rope. Azeria had been given a choice, but both options favored the Mystics. Velgrynd could see their logic. The Yohma wanted to enslave humanity and secure healthy bodies for all the Mystics expected to immigrate to this world. Controlled slaves would be ideal. And since this world had 5 superpowers, crushing one of them would teach the others a lesson. Humans far outnumbered the Mystics. Even a fraction of them would be enough physical vessels for the invaders' purposes. "I see," Velgrynd said. "I am sure the Chinese are in a similar situation. Rossium must have refused the offer, because the royal court's door is about to be torn down by rioters. By comparison, Japan had it relatively easy." George said, "It is only a matter of time either way, I am sure. The combined Azerian-Chinese fleet is coming soon, isn't it?" Velgrynd answered, "Yes. Not that it is a problem with me around. But you were going to tell me about Emile." The Azerians and the Japanese officials, Yamamoto included, were not convinced anyone should casually wave off a combined fleet, but nobody interrupted. Everyone in the room had come to a common understanding by now. Defying Velgrynd was out of the question. George swallowed. Emile was the emissary Reagan sent. He had my son's face, my son's knowledge, but there was this incredibly evil look in his eyes. His son was grown now and serving in the military. Unfortunately, he had been deployed with the fleet at the center of this crisis. Velgrynd met George's pain with a reassuring smile, steady and ladylike. It was the sort of expression people said could calm anyone who saw it. Velgrynd told him, "It is okay, George. Calm down. What did I always say to you?" George took the cue and steadied himself. "Keep a cool head, right? I remember, Velgrynd." Velgrynd continued. "Good. And do not worry. I will save Emile for you. While I am at it, I will protect Azeria's honor as well." George answered, "Thank you. I have nothing to worry about now. Please save our United States, and save my son too." Velgrynd reassured him. You can count on it. We have around 2 months until the Yohma fully assimilate into their human hosts. Emile is just fine, all right, and so is the rest of the fleet. George said, "That is certainly a load off my shoulders." But they set off 3 weeks ago. We only have a few days left before the attack. It is all right, Velgrynd told him. That is what today's summit is for. George nodded. All right. I promise we will not hesitate to help in any way we can. I just hope this summit bears fruit for us. The conversation was over. George rose and the rest of the Azerian cabinet silently followed him. At Yamamoto's signal, the guides opened the door. One guide said, "We will take you to the waiting room now." After hearing Velgrynd's promise, everyone from Azeria looked visibly relieved. They thanked her as they filed out. Once the room settled again, Velgrynd summoned the delegation from the Holy Arcian Empire. They arrived by dimensional connection, having just crossed the ocean in a way they could not understand at all. One could easily imagine how disoriented they felt. One minister looked around in disbelief. "No, we were in a safe room only a tiny number of people know about. How did you?" Velgrynd snorted. "If you did not want anyone to pinpoint your location, you should have isolated it with a barrier or something similar and cut off all contact with the outside. Not that you could hide something like that at your level." Contact with the outside? A younger man in the group stiffened. "Oh, did you follow our transmissions to identify where we were hiding?" He had a god-class bow on his back, so Velgrynd assumed he was one of the 7 sacred treasures. Velgrynd answered, "That is right, not especially interested in him." The Arcians were outraged, but Velgrynd had no intention of indulging them. Tracing a transmission was child's play to her, and she wished people would stop acting as though everything she did was shocking. Then Zangu of Arcia, a more arrogant member of the delegation, stepped forward. "So you are Velgrynd. I am Zangu, current Emperor of Arcia. I understand you have been posing as the goddess Cardina, the one who bestowed her blessings upon our founder Shin." The young emperor was in his early 20s, a beautiful man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a well-balanced frame. Velgrynd tilted her head. "Cardina? Oh right, they called me that too. Something about being too lowly to call me by my real name. I had no idea that nickname was the one that survived. Do not tell me the real one was lost from the records." Zangu challenged her. "You refuse to admit it then? What a farce. Or do you think your beauty gives you free rein to rant and rave all you want?" Zangu was convinced Velgrynd was lying. That attitude was dangerous. If a subordinate had made the mistake, blame could have been placed on them. If a higher official had shown proper remorse, the situation might have been smoothed over. But when the highest person in the nation made the wrong choice, there were consequences that could not be taken back. Bright, leader of the 7 sacred treasures, nearly had his eyes pop out when he heard his emperor speak. He had explained how fearsome Velgrynd was. They had just experienced a supernatural transportation across the sea. Anyone capable of such a spell had to be either divine or very close to it. Angering her was beyond ill-advised, and his own emperor was doing it anyway. Bright was not the only one reeling. Kanji Yamamoto was just as alarmed. Yamamoto's mind raced. Was the Emperor of Arcia really this reckless? If he angered Ryu-oh, no one could predict what disaster would follow. The first thing Yamamoto did was send a message to an assistant. Yamamoto ordered, "Bring His Majesty here at once." The assistant protested. "But sir, that is..." Yamamoto snapped. "Say no more, fool. I know it is disrespectful, but he is the only man who can stop Ryu-oh." The assistant stopped protesting. "Right away, sir." Under normal circumstances, Kanji Yamamoto was the worst kind of middle manager, acting like a supreme being while doing little real work. But when it came to judging exactly whom not to cross, he was a born genius. That skill had carried him through this crisis, and he was about to need it again. Everyone in the room sensed the danger, but the emperor who had caused it remained casual. Zangu laughed under his breath. "Cat got your tongue now that you realize I will not be tricked so easily. I know a con artist like you would not understand this, but I am not like the foolish rabble around me. I too have been accepted by one of our sacred treasures. I hold the 7th position among their ranks. That is the man you were attempting to hoodwink. Zangu was tremendously proud of himself, and he was telling the truth. A god-class sword hung from his waist, faintly glowing. Velgrynd had noticed it, of course. She simply had not spoken because she was so aghast. Velgrynd said at last, "Are you kidding me? You have me right here, and that is how you react? Could someone this incompetent really be descended from Shin?" As she lamented, another thought occurred to her. Zangu had refused to trust her from the beginning, even after hearing secret matters that only someone from Shin's era could have known. A king's caution was not a sin by itself. But if he still doubted her after that, it meant one of two things. Either he was too slow to understand the value of what she had revealed, or those secrets were common knowledge and Arcia's confidential records were not being guarded properly. Neither possibility was acceptable. "Incompetent?" Zangu said. "Are you referring to me?" Velgrynd replied, "You do not even understand that? What a pity. But you have gone through over 4,000 years of history in the meantime, so I suppose any bloodline would deteriorate." Velgrynd grinned. Zangu's outlandish behavior exasperated her, but she was not petty enough to grow angry over this alone. Zangu, however, was livid. "So not only do you keep up the act, you mock me to my face? Foolish girl. Let me ask you this. You dare to claim the name of a goddess, and you even brag that you can copy her powers? If you can create a sacred treasure, show me, right now. Fail, and you will be exposed for what you truly are." Velgrynd said, "I do not really want to." Zangu shot back, "I will not listen to excuses. You are the one making impossible promises, and you are the one who must pay the price." "Oh, but I will not kill you. You do seem decently powerful, and you certainly have the beauty to match. I will make you into my personal plaything, so do not worry." Zangu's ranting seemed endless. Everyone except him and Velgrynd held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Zangu was clearly in the wrong, but the fact that Velgrynd was still being patient gave them a thin glimmer of hope. They watched her, praying that somehow this would end peacefully. "Well," Zangu began, "you really cannot do any of that, can?" Velgrynd cut him off. "I would like to say a few things to you, but all right. I did make that promise, so I will give you what you want." She pooled her magicules together and with create material produced an azure dragon sword. Velgrynd asked, "Will this suffice?" "I doubt you can use it to its fullest, but it has god-class abilities. I will assure you of that." Zangu accepted it instinctively, then froze. The glow of the sword charmed him at once. It was unmistakably the real thing. There was no longer any room to doubt Velgrynd's words. As a king, Zangu was not entirely inept. He was extremely arrogant, but he was not a tyrant. He had enough conscience to listen to the people he ruled. Today, with the first meeting of the 5 superpowers in ages taking place, he had acted more high-handed than usual so no one would think him weak. That had been his mistake, and at long last he realized it. Then confusion swallowed him. Could someone from mythology really have appeared in the modern age? It was too ridiculous to accept. Velgrynd, perhaps cutting him some slack because he was descended from one of Ludora's former companions, was being as gentle as possible. If he had been unrelated to Shin, the talking would have ended long ago, and blood might already have been on the walls. Zangu had all the luck in the world, but he still could not accept reality. And then his thoughts took the worst possible turn. If a goddess from myth truly existed, who would be more appropriate to stand at his side? If he could secure her for Arcia, perhaps all their problems would be solved. His idea was absurd, but he sincerely believed he was snatching victory from defeat. "Now I see," Zangu declared. "Velgrynd, my goddess, you crossed time itself to meet me. What a gallant thing to do for love. Very well. Allow me to answer your feelings in kind. I swear that I will love and cherish you for the rest of my life." He was horribly mistaken, and the entire room was watching it happen. Velgrynd stared at him in pure bewilderment. Velgrynd asked, "What kind of joke is that?" Zangu pressed on. "No need to be shy. We will wait until the end of hostilities for the formal introduction. But once everything is settled, I will gladly accept you as my true empress. It is said that Shin never managed to father a son with his beloved goddess. But what will we bequeath to the world, I wonder? With divine blood, I am sure Arcia will reach greater heights than ever before. Zangu's arbitrary delusions stunned Velgrynd into silence. As her mind caught up, she wondered whether she had ever been so insulted in her life. Or perhaps it was not that she could not understand the nonsense. Perhaps she simply did not want to believe it was happening. The audience's reactions were even worse. The 7 sacred treasures wanted to scream for someone to stop their emperor, but all they could do was send desperate looks toward the ministers. Their instincts told them that something terrible would happen if this continued. No man had the right to make a goddess do his bidding, and divine punishment seemed moments away. The ministers did not move. They could not. Velgrynd's face had gone expressionless, and that only made her beauty more terrifying. The 7 sacred treasures turned toward Bright. Bright felt their stares and cursed his own bad luck. The Japanese intelligence officials were no happier. After working all night to prepare this summit, they found themselves wondering just how stupid the Arcian emperor could be. His courage was undeniable, but if Velgrynd flew into a rage, everyone would pay for it. Zangu continued, unaware that the air itself had become dangerous. A splendid offer, is it not? And you would hardly receive as much attention from some ancient senile emperor with barely any time left in his life. I, on the other hand, would spend every evening. Velgrynd said one word. What? The room froze. Everyone realized at once that the disaster they feared had arrived. Zangu, struck by the full weight of Velgrynd's anger, could not move. He finally understood that he had gone too far, but the words could not be taken back. Only now did the ancient records he had read come back to him. The goddess's personality, even if half the myths were exaggerations, was said to be intense beyond belief. Whenever anyone insulted those she loved, she would destroy entire countries over it. Excavations in the lands named by the records had uncovered buried cities whose outer walls had been melted by an intense flame and turned glass-like. Zangu's mind showed him a future where the lands of Arcia were seared by fire. His face went pale. He had committed the ultimate taboo, and it was too late to undo it. His destruction seemed assured, but someone finally acted. It was Yamamoto. If Velgrynd lost control, Yamamoto would bear responsibility for the failure of the summit. The lives of everyone in the room were in danger, but his reputation might have been an even more immediate concern to him. Still, he was not rotten enough to run away. From the moment the war had broken out, he had accepted that someone needed to step up, and he saw that role as his own. So he reacted before Velgrynd could speak. Yamamoto shouted, "You insolent buffoon! What could possibly drive you to insult His Majesty, our Emperor? This could be the basis for war itself. What do you say to that?" He shouted before Velgrynd could say anything, or more accurately, to keep her from opening her mouth at all. Humans tend to calm down when someone nearby vents anger first, and apparently that worked on true dragons as well. It was the greatest play of the day, and it belonged entirely to Kanji Yamamoto. Some of his earlier setup paid off at the same moment. Oharu asked from the doorway, "What is all this noise?" The Emperor Yamamoto had summoned at the risk of his own neck appeared with perfect timing. Yamamoto began, "Oh, Your Majesty." Oharu rushed in and addressed Velgrynd as calmly as he could. "Ryu-oh, do not let the words of the young bother you. I am sure Zangu here was merely testing you to see if you were truly worth trusting." Internally, Oharu was panicking. He had jogged down the hallway for the first time in several decades. Outwardly, however, he showed none of it. He looked every bit the stately ruler the world believed him to be, and the sight of him made Velgrynd's anger recede. Regaining her reason, she considered what he had said. Velgrynd asked, "So he deliberately tried to bait me in order to see how far he would need to go to anger me?" Yes, Oharu said. Indeed, probably something like that. Calming Velgrynd was Oharu's primary task. He would gladly accept an insult or two if it meant saving the room. And it worked. Velgrynd accepted the excuse. "Ah, yes, I see. I did not want to think the descendant of Shin was that suicidal anyway. It makes sense." Velgrynd nodded deeply and gave him a gentle, beautiful smile. Oharu was relieved enough to take the lead at once. "Now," he said, "I am sure our Arcian guests are very tired, so let us take them to the waiting room." The Emperor would not normally handle something like that himself, but he had no choice. Everyone moved at once as though a spell had been broken and the world dodged one very serious bullet. In future generations, Arcia would become much friendlier toward the conquering empire of Japan. In particular, deep respect and popularity would be awarded to those with the last name Yamamoto. They would be listed in history textbooks, credited with saving Arcia from grave danger. The fact would appear on final exams so often that nearly everyone who went through the Arcian school system would know it. Kanji Yamamoto would be described as the Arcian ally who talked Emperor Zangu back to his senses. All his groveling had earned him immortality in history, though he could not have known that at the time. With the Arcians gone, calm returned to the room. Oharu retired to his chambers to take medication for his upset stomach, and Velgrynd decided to resume work. Still, she mused, it has been quite a while since anyone tried to test me like that. Zangu, was it? He is certainly growing in a fascinating way, just like I would expect from Shin's progeny. Yamamoto gave a nervous laugh. Yes, I am sure. I was quite surprised as well. What he truly wanted was for Velgrynd to stop talking about it. His reputation in the department was flying high right now, so he could only hope everyone would stay patient with her. Velgrynd began. So that just leaves the Republic of Chinese Fiefdoms Yamamoto supplied. Velgrynd said, right, yes. As allies of the conquering empire, the Chinese had been the last to agree to talks, and only on the condition that the other nations were committed. Velgrynd had not spoken with them directly yet, so she was unaware of the full situation. Their head of state, officially titled the General Secretary, arrived with several government figures and bodyguards. They greeted Velgrynd while hiding whatever shock they felt. I am Wang Rongren, the General Secretary said. You are Ryu-oh? Velgrynd answered, that is right. Wang challenged her. You look exactly like a human to me, but we will not be deceived so easily. Have you infiltrated our closest ally now, Yohma? Or is this all a deception meant to make us think so? Wang Rongren wasted no time antagonizing Velgrynd. The Japanese officials began sweating all over again, and Velgrynd herself muttered, again? Judging by Wang's behavior, something serious was happening in his homeland. Velgrynd decided not to answer carelessly until she understood it. Wang raised his voice. I do not know where this is, but we volunteered to venture into the tiger's den. Do not assume your schemes will harm us that readily, cursed Yohma. At Wang's shout, the Chinese bodyguards moved. They wore white changpao robes that gave them freedom of motion, and their refined synchronization marked them as martial arts masters. None of that mattered to Velgrynd, but their anger was real. Yohma, we concede your strength is fearsome, one bodyguard declared. But know that we will never forgive you for the name you stole. Another shouted, the dragon in your name was taken by Long, the progenitor of our Dragon Fist style. No Yohma should ever dream of bringing that name to her lips. The bodyguards roared with rage. The Japanese reaction, by contrast, was muted. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Not again, she is the real one. Velgrynd, however, noticed something else. Velgrynd brightened. Long, you said? Ah, yes. Someone by that name did call his skill set Dragon Fist, did he not? And this is the world Long lived in, too. You must be his students. He passed his skills on to you, did he? How delightful. Even after studying in the Royal Library, Velgrynd did not know every famous person in history. Japan would not have books about hidden martial arts schools in foreign countries. It would have been understandable if Long had not come to mind at once, but now she spoke of him like a long-lost friend. The Chinese delegation was bewildered. One bodyguard demanded, why are you acting as though this is some grand discovery for you? Trying to hide the truth? Another guard said. Good luck. We are the best of their elites, and we will crush you in your attempts to destroy us. A third bodyguard said, we will start with you, the one who took our master's noble name. We must restore the pride of our homeland. The bodyguards took fighting stances. Velgrynd only smiled. Oh my, she said, you have certainly honed your drives for battle, at least by the standards of this world. I can tell you have striven to improve yourselves and trained constantly. I am so glad you are still taking Long's teaching seriously. Velgrynd was no longer looking at them as enemies. She saw them almost as beloved pupils. That shift in attitude only enraged them further. One bodyguard snapped, "How dare you ridicule us?" Another urged, "Let her. We should all leap upon her at once." They were ready to rely on their fists, but a smaller figure stopped them. She was the only one among them wearing a robe embroidered with the character for dragon. Xienhua commanded, "Halt. This is not anyone you could ever beat." Her voice was clear and refined. She had dark eyes, dark hair, and a calm presence that silenced the bodyguards at once. One bodyguard stammered, "Lady Xienhua?" Another tried, but the sight of Xienhua, the Holy Fist, stopped them cold. She was the most powerful among them, cool-headed and defiant no matter the enemy before her, and yet they could see anxiety and sweat on her face. "I will take her on," Xienhua said. After that challenge, no one else dared to speak. Velgrynd regarded her with interest. "You are the current master? Your will impresses me. You deserve praise." "I am," Xienhua replied. "I have taken on the Hunpo, the spiritual and animal soul, of the holy fists of the past. They inherited the greatest power there is. If you are truly the real Longhuang, or Ryu-oh as Japan calls you, may I ask you for a fight?" Velgrynd agreed. "No problem. I will be glad to educate you. I hope you appreciate the honor." The arrangements were made with almost absurd speed. Before anyone else could intervene, the rest of them had become an audience, waiting to see how the fight would go. For a short while, all anyone could do was watch. Then the outcome became clear. Velgrynd won in a dominant victory. It was not even close, although only Xienhua truly understood how one-sided it had been. To the audience, Xienhua seemed to be launching an all-out frontal attack. To her better-trained Dragon Fist students, it looked as though she was cornering Velgrynd with fists and kicks infused with bluish-white lightning. Dragon Fist was passed on to one person at a time. Its skills went to the most talented of the master's pupils, regardless of bloodline. The most important inheritance was the Hunpo Xienhua had mentioned, a forbidden ability that recorded all the skills its user had earned and passed them to the successor. A portion of the master's internal strength passed along as well, so each generation carried more fighting spirit, refined to a higher quality. The successor did not always inherit every ability, but as long as Hunpo was among them, there would be hope for the next generation. Long had breathed his last with that hope in mind, dreaming that an all-powerful martial artist would one day be born from his teachings. Xienhua had been born into that history. And as the Holy Fist, she was more than worthy of being called its strongest heir. Her inherited Hunpo had fully integrated with her spiritual will, making the skills and strength of the past her own. She had reached a level of power that was unusual, almost eerie for this world. In terms of existence points, she was over 100,000. In the demi-material key world where Velgrynd had been born, Xienhua would have been overwhelming enough to be classified as enlightened. Nobody in this world could hope to compare with her. She had simply chosen the wrong opponent. Howifing. Velgrynd toyed with her for a little while, and that alone was enough to mark Xienhua's defeat. Xienhua lowered herself and admitted it plainly. "I give." Velgrynd laughed with genuine delight. "Such wonderful strength. Certainly stronger than Gensei. In this world, I think you could have beaten Kondo too." Despite the beating, Xienhua looked refreshed. All doubts about Velgrynd had vanished, and she accepted that this was the real Longhuang. Velgrynd, for her part, was overjoyed that the Long she loved had seen his martial art passed down to the present day. She praised Xienhua and her students lavishly and was even ready to give them 1 or 2 god-class weapons. That last part never happened at that moment, but the joy she radiated was undeniable. After many twists and turns, the leaders of all the relevant states were finally assembled. The Chinese political leaders who had arrived with Wang Rongren, apart from Wang himself, turned out to be more martial artists in disguise. They had assumed this meeting was a Yohma trap. Japan understood the reasoning well enough that no blame was assigned, and they were soon replaced with the actual government officials. The Chinese explanation was a painfully familiar story of hostages being taken only on a national scale. The mystics had begun by targeting the children of the nation's leaders. Over time, they expanded their influence, increased their numbers, gained new connections, attached themselves to their targets, brainwashed them, and sent them off to their bases. Teachers, co-workers, bosses, families, all had gradually been possessed. The Yohma were around 70% of the way toward their ultimate goal. That was why the invasion of the United States of Azeria had been approved by unanimous vote in the National People's Council. Wang lowered his head. I do not expect an apology to be enough, but I hope you understand that none of us were willing participants in this. George answered him first. It is fine. I understand that every nation has its own issues to tackle. My own son was taken from me besides. If I put my family and my nation on the scales, my choice is going to be the same every time. That is my responsibility as president. Even so, I am not going to give up until the very end. Wang nodded. Yes, I understand how you feel. The two leaders acknowledged each other. Along those lines, said Emperor Magellan of the Greater Rossium dynasty, let me apologize as well. His military was beyond his control, staging a mad invasion of the Chinese Fiefdoms, and he admitted before the room that he had no way to stop it. Emperor Zangu spoke next, unusually humble by his standards. I suppose I am just as guilty then. Our invasion of Greater Rossium was a terrible misstep engineered by the Yohma. It is time for me to admit that as well. After Yamamoto and Oharu's quick thinking had saved his life, Zangu had spent time in the waiting room calming down. With a cool head, he had realized just how dangerous his behavior had been. He was not a talentless ruler, and he could read which way the wind was blowing. So he had talked with his 7 sacred treasures. Zangu's right-hand man was 4th ranked among the 7. One of the 7 had joined the invasion of Rossium and still had not returned, so the 4th-ranked member had been brought in to replace her for this event. The missing member was a woman who had burned so badly to fight that she requested permission to join the operation, then moved her military unit without waiting for headquarters to answer. It was a clear violation of the chain of command, and a sacred treasure staging an invasion without imperial orders was a serious issue. She had once been steadfastly against opening hostilities, but recently she had undergone an obvious change of heart that confused those around her and placed her under suspicion. After her most recent crime, the government had decided to search for proof. As much as they hated to treat a hero and sacred treasure as an enemy, they had failed to find conclusive evidence that a Yohma had taken her over. But now they had no choice but to accept it as fact. It was a gut-wrenching, pride-destroying decision. The battle between Velgrynd and Xienhua had taken place in the courtyard visible from the waiting room. The 7 sacred treasures together could not defeat the Holy Fist, and Velgrynd had handled her like it was nothing. The treasures understood there was no point in continuing to bluff about their strength, and Zangu agreed. Without any further delay, the Holy Arcian Empire renounced its ambitions to conquer the world. Zangu had also remembered something from the myths. Anyone who earned the goddess's blessings would rule the world. If that was inevitable truth, then Oharu was the mightiest ruler of their generation. Understanding that clearly, Zangu pledged his full allegiance to Oharu. So the summit began with a flurry of apologies. Oharu attempted to join in. If I may also speak, Wang cut him off immediately. No, I understand the conquering empire of Japan's position well enough. George followed just as quickly. Right. We of the United States regret forcing you into a decision as well. The others in the room, including Yamamoto standing motionless against the wall, could read their leader's thoughts. If they tried to pin blame on Oharu in front of Velgrynd, it would almost certainly raise her hackles. Yamamoto glanced at Velgrynd and understood that he would have made the same choice in their place. After the apologies, the summit moved on to strategy against the Yohma. But very quickly, every set of eyes turned toward Velgrynd. Japan's army minister hated asking the question. He was the commander of one of the conquering empire's greatest forces, not someone paid to push responsibility onto others. This time, however, nobody criticized him. Ryu-oh, he said. What sort of strategy do you think would be effective against the Yohma? Every world leader waited for Velgrynd's reply. They had no other choice. They possessed no firepower capable of resisting enemies beyond human knowledge. Velgrynd was completely casual. She looked at the army minister as though the answer were obvious. Velgrynd asked him, "You understand that any military deployment is meaningless, right?" The minister nodded grimly. "Yes, regrettably. It might keep them from approaching our homeland, but we would never fight a naval battle with them anyway. We could put everybody here into our ships, and we would still never be able to resist the Yohma." He was right. If the fleet came close enough to Japan, its cannons could target Japanese cities, so building a defensive line still had value. But if they had no chance of winning, it was pointless as a true strategy. They were not even certain the Yohma intended to destroy cities. If the invaders could possess people's minds, they would likely prefer to co-opt cities for their own use. In that case, they had no reason to stage a grand naval battle. "Precisely," Velgrynd said. "Guns do not work on Yohma, and no foot soldier will provide meaningful resistance." That narrows it down to two choices. The army minister asked, "What are those?" Velgrynd answered, "Either leave all of this to me, or try a little harder by yourselves. One of those." For the proud military men and women in the room, the choice was humiliating. But the reality was that none of them had anything to counter Velgrynd with. They were gathered here as the supposed greatest wielders of war in this world, and now they could only exchange glances, measuring each other's reactions. Their eyes told the story. They were in agreement. Gensei Araki and Saburo Minamoto, proud swordsmen of the conquering empire, were the first to speak. Gensei said, "This is our issue to solve. I have no intention of acting proud here, but it would be pathetic to rely on Ryu-oh for everything. If there is anything I can accomplish, I want to risk my life on it." Minamoto agreed. "I share my companion's view." The 7 sacred treasures of Arcia followed. One of the 7 sacred treasures said, "Well, I do not want Japan seizing all the glory. I want us to play a role in this too." Another said, "We cannot have His Majesty Zangu come out and fight himself. I hope he can leave this to us." A third agreed, "Exactly. The Emperor has duties he can carry out only if he is alive. This is a job for us to handle." The 6 members other than Zangu were ready to contribute. Xienhua, the Holy Fist, was just as resolute. "Long Huang, my lord," she said, bowing her head. "If you are willing to offer the human race your protection, we have nothing to fear. Even if we are defeated, with you on our side, victory in the long run is all but guaranteed. So please, allow us smaller presences the chance to grow and prosper in battle." That made her the 9th warrior to volunteer. There was still one more. Said codename Billy, head of the United States Secret Service detail. "Is it all right if I join you?" Billy was there to guard President Hayes personally. By any measure, he was a professional at warfare. Though only 26, he cut an intense, masculine figure, scar across one cheek, and he was proficient with magic. He even handcrafted the bullets for his gun, ensuring that whatever he shot would meet its maker, ghosts included. The act was courageous, and Billy looked the part, but compared to the other 9 volunteers, he was clearly a step below. His physical ability was unremarkable, and his weaponry was not especially noteworthy. He was braver than the others in the room who had stayed silent, too timid to imagine they could help. But whether he could truly contribute in combat was uncertain. Billy knew that as well. He waited nervously for Velgrynd's answer. George chose to support him. Billy has proven extremely talented in his guard duty. He has saved my life multiple times, and Emile is just as fond of him. I will withdraw him if he would only get in the way, but if possible, I would like you to take him along. Giving up such a trusted member of his personal staff would expose George to more danger. He understood that, but with humanity facing extinction, he could not simply do nothing. He believed Billy could hold his own against lower-level Yohma, and he offered him in hopes of expanding their fighting power. This group would become the team assigned to raid the Yohma headquarters. They would destroy the portal Velgrynd called the Underworld Gate and eliminate the invaders' threat at its core. Everyone had resolved to do this. Velgrynd answered with a measured smile. Velgrynd said, "If you had chosen to leave everything to me, I would have protected only those I wanted to protect. but I am glad to see you have the enthusiasm to fight. In appreciation of your resolve, I will help you a little." She meant it. If they had picked the former option, Velgrynd had been ready to leave the human race to its fate. She could have taken her favorites, people like Oharu and George Hayes, and transported them into another world to live. Goddesses could be finicky like that. But the representatives of humanity had made the right choice, so Velgrynd responded in kind. Velgrynd added, "Codename Billy, was it? All right, I will let you on the team. I have no reason to turn you down. Your strength is on the same level as Minamoto over there, and if we can do something about your weapons, I think we can make both of you much deadlier." Her mind made up, Velgrynd asked Minamoto and Billy to hand over their weapons. Minamoto dutifully gave her his beloved blade. Billy gave her his favorite Smith & Wesson Model 27 revolver. Velgrynd accepted both and immediately engineered their rebirth as God-class weapons. The two men stared at their transformed arms in awe. Minamoto could barely speak. Billy was just as stunned. What did she even? Both understood at once how plainly more lethal their weapons had become. Gensei was not so surprised, having experienced this before. He simply nodded, serene. The others were less calm. The 7 sacred treasures were shocked that Velgrynd was allowing God-class weapons to flow freely to other nations. But in the coming fight, those weapons would undoubtedly help, and this was no time for Velgrynd to hold back. Oharu voiced no objections. "That should make you two more capable," Velgrynd said. "But I want one thing to remain clear. The only real power among all of you is Xienhua, and Xienhua alone." "What was your name again? Bright?" Bright straightened. "Yes, my lady." Velgrynd continued. "Right. You are the most decent among the rest, but you are still not even drawing out 3% of your God-class weapon. The others are not close either. Maybe 1 or 2%. I would like to see more effort from you all, please. If they could unleash the full force of a God-class weapon, they would reawaken as spiritual life forms capable of defeating most Yohma single-handedly. At this point, such a transformation was nowhere near possible for any of them. Velgrynd had designed the sacred treasures so the blood descendants of Shin could access their powers, and they could use the equipment well enough, but they could not unleash its true firepower. Even so, there was no need for shame. Magicules were sparse in this world, which made everything frailer and more vulnerable. If these people crossed worlds and had their bodies remade in the process, they would likely awaken to enlightened status. Xienhua herself had every chance of reaching the saint level. So the warriors were ready. It was time for the grand counterattack.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.